I wanted to address an issue that I don't think a lot of people are talking about with the Magic Keyboard. So I guess you consider this my review of the Magic Keyboard, but I just want to give you guys like an honest, day-to-day realistic scenario of how the Magic Keyboard can be used and what it actually looks like when someone's using it. But it's just going to be a really practical, hands-on approach to what you can expect with this keyboard. So first of all, there's no function row keys, which a lot of people have talked about and complained about, and I agree. It would be really nice if there was a function row key, but honestly, I don't think it's a deal breaker really, because when you go into the control center, it's actually pretty easy to change the brightness and the volume. So if you just go up here, let me do it with my right hand because I can't do anything with my left hand. You just scroll up there and you can like slide really easily. You can see I'm just using 2 fingers here, and it lets you slide the volume and you switch over to the brightness. It's pretty easy to do. So I would like there to be a function row key at some point. It's, I think, a lot easier, but it's not a deal breaker in my opinion that there isn't one. The one issue I did have was the backlighting with the keyboard. So I turned off the backlighting actually because it was draining the battery, I think, too much, and it didn't need to be on all the time. So it was always on for some reason, even when there's a lot of light. It was on just a little bit, but it was still on, which would really drain the battery. So I just turned it off completely. And, again, if you had a function row key, you could be able to turn off the backlighting really easily like you can on a Mac. But without a function row key, I just had to turn it off. So there's no manual adjustment really of backlighting without having to you have to go into settings to manually adjust it, which is just a pain. Also, without the function row key, you don't get an escape key, which, again, would be nice, but you can always reroute one of these keys to be an escape key. I haven't found myself needing an escape key really. I think that the trackpad and using touch has been sufficient, but an escape key, again, that would be solved with a function row key. And then finally, one more complaint is that this iPad has very limited viewing angles. So for typing, I think this viewing angle is perfectly fine. But if you want to flip the screen all the way around so you can write flat on the iPad, you can't do that. You can't flip this anymore. This is as far back as it's going to go. So you have to take the iPad off and set it down on a table. Or what I do is I take the iPad off and I put it into this magnetic case so that the back is protected and it's not scratching or getting scratched by the surface it's resting on. So it's actually really easy to slip it off of there and magnetically attach it to one of these types of cases that's also magnetic. And I found that to be, a pretty useful way to do it. It is like an extra step and an extra accessory that you have to buy, but this is not that expensive. And I think it really, if you can protect your device and you take a lot of handwritten notes, you should probably do something along those lines as well. So the actual issue that I have with this keyboard is touching the screen when it's attached to the keyboard. And I'm calling this the iPad screen wobble problem. And I don't know if a lot of people have really talked about this, and maybe you're expecting it to wobble because it is floating. But if you touch the bottom of the screen, it's actually pretty stable. You can see I'm putting quite a bit of force on there, and it's just moving a little bit. But as you start moving up, you can see that it really starts to wobble as you get up there. And especially at the very top, I'm not putting that much force at all, and it is wobbling a lot. You can really see that there. That's a lot of wobble. Now moving my finger down, the wobble stops, especially when you get really low. But then you start going up again, and yeah. That's a lot of wobble. So it's really not a great experience when you're touching something really quick, even though if you're not putting that much force, I can just tap it a little and it still wobbles. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but I'm just tapping it very lightly and it's very wobble. And if you put a little bit of too much force, it's wobbling a lot. So that's been one of the main issues I've had with the keyboard for sure. Now, in terms of the weight of the keyboard, I don't think it's too bad. I think it's really manageable, and I think it's better to have more weight than less weight if you can keep the iPad stable, especially in your lap. So it is very lappable, actually. I've been sitting down on it, and I'm by myself, so I can't show you how it looks like on my lap, really. But you can take my word for it, hopefully, that if you are sitting on a couch, it is lappable. If you're sitting on a chair that's going to have an incline where your laptop would slide off, then obviously this is going to not slide, but it'll tip over. So you have to keep your hands rested on here to keep it steady. But in that instance, a laptop would also slide off. So I've tested this, like in this desk chair that I have here, if I'm sitting on it and I'm putting it on my lap, which I can show you, I guess. So let's go ahead and sit down. So I'm just sitting here with my legs like this, and now if I just keep my legs down and I don't hold it, you can see that it's about to fall. So what you have to do is you have to keep one hand resting on the keyboard, and then you're good to go. Then it's not gonna fall. But this is such a steep angle that if I had a laptop on my legs at this angle, the laptop would slide off, but this doesn't slide, it just tips. So you have to make sure you grab it in time so it doesn't tip over. Another minor complaint I have is the trackpad. So it's pretty tiny. It's not very big. I don't think it's a big issue most of the time, but if I have the chance, I would definitely prefer to use my external mouse. I use an MX Master 3, and I'd rather use that on the side than the trackpad if I have the choice, especially if I'm using the iPad for a while, because your hand can start to cramp a little bit. Especially, I have very sensitive hands, I guess, but I always had an issue with my hands cramping with these trackpads, even on my MacBook, which is still pretty big in comparison. It's not as big as the really new trackpads. This is from 2015. But even that trackpad is quite a bit bigger than this trackpad. But my hand still cramps a little bit with that trackpad. So yeah, my hand definitely does cramp if I'm using it for an extended period of time with the smaller trackpad. But in terms of like maneuvering with this small trackpad, it's really fine. It's not, there is plenty of space to get to every corner of the screen that you want to get to. I don't find that to be an issue at all. It's just that if you have to keep your hand in this small, cramped up kind of position for a long period of time, that can be a little bit uncomfortable. The good thing about the iPad though is that it also does allow you to touch things. So sometimes if I don't want to do that for a long period of time with the trackpad, I can just reach up and touch the screen, which is a lot nicer. Now in terms of practical applications of using this trackpad and the keyboard together, what I really have to say is, before when I had the smart keyboard on my other iPad Pro, I found myself not using the keyboard that much because I would still have to reach up and touch the screen every time I wanted to do something. So I kept having to move my hands back and forth over and over, and that just kind of felt like it was defeating the purpose of the keyboard. But now with the trackpad, I find myself mainly just, keeping my hand around in this area, and I don't have to keep jumping back and forth. So now I'm more willing to use the keyboard too, and it makes the experience much better, especially when you're taking notes. So like in Notion, which has just been updated for iPad use, so I'm making lists for med schools and stuff like that, and when I'm typing up all this information and the research I'm doing for these med schools, it's really nice to do on the iPad because you have a cursor, so I don't have to reach up with my finger to navigate to all the pages I need to get to. I can just do it all from here, and I can start typing. So it's very laptop-esque in that sense. And it's super nice because now I can have Notion pulled up here and have like MSAR data on my laptop, so I can look at that screen for the data I need and then type whatever I need to on this device. But it's also like having two different displays, so that has been really nice for sure. Another nice way I've been using this is in GoodNotes. What is nice is if I'm using these text boxes here, it's a lot easier to copy and paste and move them with the cursor than it is to do with your fingers and having to move them everywhere. So I've been using the cursor to move these text boxes around. And as you can see, as I continue to make my notes here, and eventually I make these notes a little bit neater and to look something more along the lines of this, I'm gonna have to create more text boxes and stuff, and I'll be using the trackpad for that because it's really easy. And then I don't have to use GoodNotes on my laptop, which doesn't have Apple Pencil support. So I can quickly switch between the Apple Pencil and the trackpad really easily with the Magic Keyboard. So that's been really nice to do as well. But other than that, I think the Magic Keyboard overall is a pretty solid package. It costs a lot of money, and I realize that it's not something that most people might want to spend that much money on. But I do have to say that people who are spending that much money on an iPad anyway are probably going to be able to justify to themselves why they would want to spend an absurd amount of money on this keyboard. And the reason why I know that is because I've literally just done that, right? So I've spent a ton of money on this iPad, and it makes it easier to justify why you should be spending more money on a keyboard, because if you're already spending that much money on an iPad, it's like it kind of makes sense that yeah, you can spend that much more money on the keyboard to make the experience even better. But if you're not going to want to spend that much money, I don't think that you're missing out a lot, especially if you're a student. I think that just the Apple Pencil and the iPad in itself is such an incredible experience. You don't really necessarily need a keyboard. But if you are looking for something that can potentially have laptop-esque capabilities, I definitely recommend the Magic Keyboard for sure. I think it is such a seamless experience to have with the iPad. Not to mention, something I forgot, is that it has an extra USB-C port at the bottom here, so you can use that for charging only, but still, now you can use that for charging, and you can use the USB-C port on your device to connect to an external display, or to an external hard drive, or something like that, or any other accessory or peripheral that you want. So realistically, having this Magic Keyboard, I think really improves the experience. And I would recommend that everyone give it a shot if you have the chance to, because I think it's just a really, really great experience to have with the iPad. I'm really excited to see what other software features will be coming out in the future that can better utilize this hardware. I'm really hoping Final Cut Pro comes to the iPad, because that would be amazing if I could just do all my edits on the iPad. My Mac is about 5 years old now, so it's slowing down a little bit, but it's been pretty good so far. But if I can have a dedicated machine, a mobile machine here especially, that could do video editing, especially with the A12Z chip that's in here, which is incredibly powerful, I think it could be a really great experience, especially with fantastic software. So that is what I'm looking forward to. If you want, I would say hold off on the Magic Keyboard if you really aren't sure until you see what other software can really utilize it. And then I think you can be able to make a more informed decision. But if you think that it might help you, and you have the means to buy it, I definitely think you should go for it, because it really will, I think, improve your experience. But let me know what you guys think. Do you have the Magic Keyboard, and do you find it useful? Do you think it's too many compromises with this type of accessory? Let me know what you think. I think it's a lot of compromise, but overall a pretty enjoyable package, so I am happy that I have one. But that's going to wrap this video up. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know, and I will see you in the next one.